Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I talk to Alec Blenis. He's a competitive athlete, a strength and conditioning coach, he's a science nerd, and he's ran things from ultra marathons, obstacle courses, and he does CrossFit and comes up with some really unique and interesting exercises for hypertrophy, and really just his philosophy is about being anti-fragile. He wants people to not be afraid of fatigue, not be afraid of certain positions, but do it in a smart and educated manner. I find his content on social media really refreshing, and he takes a different perspective and different lens to what a lot of people I see online doing. And so I thought it would be a great discussion to have with him, first of all, to talk a bit about his background from being interested in doing physics, playing tennis, and then going towards running ultra marathons and finding how he was actually very, very good at that. And how does his training look like now to do some almost elite times for ultra marathons while still hitting PRs in the gym? How does he go about that? How does he advise people start incorporating cardio into their routine? What about the interference effect? How do you want to navigate that? Is that a concern? And then just talking a bit about exercise selection, length and partials, all that good stuff that I know you guys will really, really love. As a reminder, if you do enjoy this, please do take a screenshot, share it over on social media, tag myself and Alec, and also just give us a thumbs up, give us a great review over on Spotify or whatever podcast platform that you're using, comment over on the YouTube, subscribe, all that good stuff goes a long way so I can continue to draw in fantastic guests just like Alec. But without further ado, let's get into the chat. So Alec, we were just talking off air and I basically said I couldn't be almost more different than you in regards to I am bodybuilding through and through. That is my love, passion, and I don't really have room for anything else because I want to take that to the most competitive level possible. But a lot of the listeners are not the same as me. And you're someone who I've come across, and I really appreciate a lot of your content because you challenge quite a lot of, I think, like preconceived beliefs, and you come from evidence-based, scientific-based kind of perspective, which is kind of all the people that come onto the podcast have that view. But you are a competitive athlete, you're a strength and conditioning coach, you're a self-professed science nerd as well. And actually, like, you have a background in physics and you wanted to be a physicist, which is really cool. And you do things from ultra marathons, obstacle courses, racing, CrossFit, things. Some of those I did. I did some obstacle courses when I was much younger and some running, but obviously they've all kind of passed me by. For the listeners, they might be new to you and your content and what you're about. So I'd love to get a bit of insight into your background in terms of like your athletic journey. And on a side note, I'd love to hear about some of your proudest achievements to date as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you. A little bit about me. The early childhood stuff I think is not terribly interesting. Played a lot of sports and wasn't great at any of them, but I was pretty good at most of them. So I kind of bounced around, did a little bit of everything, which I think was great. I didn't like specialize early in anything, just got like really good, broad athletic experience, but never really found anything that I was like, oh, this is my thing that I'm really, really good at and stuck with for a long time. It wasn't until I found running through like middle school track and field, cross country, that I started to think, okay, this might be something I stick with for a little while. Ran through middle school, ran through high school. I was good, but I wasn't great. Like uh, middle of high school, I think I ran a 5:12 mile, which to a lot of people that sounds really quite good, but for a high schooler who's been running for a number of years, it's kind of pedestrian or mediocre in terms of those standards. So it's not like I had some sort of crazy genetic aptitude for endurance sports either. But I was also doing other sports. I was on the football team as well. I played soccer. I wrestled. So I kind of had all of that kind of stuff going on at the same time. And it wasn't until I discovered the sport of obstacle course racing that I actually really excelled at something. I did my first obstacle race through Spartan Race, made the podium, third place in my first event, and was like, wow, it's like everything I've been training for my whole life. I was a pole vaulter, wrestler, endurance runner. So like I had all these things. It all kind of came together into this just like gritty, rugged, like you have to be kind of strong, you have to be kind of athletic, you have to be kind of fast. And I was really quite good at it. So I ended up pursuing that with kind of everything that I had, and eventually got signed to the Spartan Race Pro team. Um, Ended up doing over 100 obstacle course races over the subsequent years. Fell into coaching other obstacle course athletes, which ended up expanding into coaching military athletes, special forces, that kind of stuff. And that's really how the coaching business got started. And that kind of hybrid niche that started with obstacle course racing, that then expanded to military, started just taking on a life of its own. And next thing I knew, I was working with anyone and everybody. So that's kind of how I got started in it. But I've now been in the industry. I've been a coach for 12 years. Been running fairly competitively for a little bit longer than that, and I've kind of dabbled in all of the different uh, sub sports. I've done a little bit of powerlifting. I've trained for physique. I've done short distance races. I've done ultra marathons. I got into CrossFit a little bit. I ended up setting, I say unofficial world record because it's not like a Guinness established thing, but the fastest known time for the CrossFit Murph workout. So really wide range of experience across a lot of different things, and it makes it sometimes hard to articulate uh, a response when people are like, "Well, what are you training for?" It's like, I don't know, man. I'm trying to just get a little bit better at everything and continually look for gaps and weaknesses, and just try to be as well rounded as possible. Right now, I'm training for a marathon, hoping to PR in my marathon this year, while continuing to add a little bit of lean mass. So I'd say kind of marathon and physique focused at the moment, but that answer will probably change in 6 months. So that's that's a little bit about me and kind of how I got into the space and where I'm at now. As far as proudest achievements in fitness, oh man, that's actually a tough question. I'd say one of my longest and most challenging, most arduous ultras was a 70-mile ultra marathon through the North Georgia mountains, and the elevation gain and the technicality of the trail. It was just an absolute sufferfest. I was really proud to get through that one. It was called the Georgia Death Race. So that's one of my proudest achievements on the endurance front. I'd say the Murph record, unofficial world record, is also one of my proudest accomplishments. And then on the pure strength side, my biggest and most impressive lifts are generally a lot of my unilateral lower body lifts. So like a 405 reverse lunge at 162 pounds body weight, so like 2.5 times body weight reverse lunge is probably the best lift that I have. Yeah, hopefully that answers that. Any follow ups to that brain dump?
Yeah, really cool. And I was kind of nodding along because I was very similar with in my younger years. I kind of was good at lots of things, but not like great at anything. And I just kind of bounced around things. It's funny enough for me, it was very much, I don't know if this played into anything you did, but for me, it was a case of I actually got bullied at school. And whilst I was good at some sports, it kind of made me more easy to be bullied because people were like, hey, I don't want you to be good. So that actually drove me away from sports. And I ended up going down like a bit of a different path. And just crazy how when you're younger, your environment can really kind of mold where you go down. Like you said, I don't know if it was just happen chance you did the obstacle course, but then it was like, if you hadn't done that, I don't know where you would be.
Yeah, it's like that whole the butterfly effect. Like every little thing, you never know where something's going to go. For me, actually, growing up in sports, I was quite a bit younger than a lot of my peers. I started school a bit early, and then skipped a grade for academic stuff. So I ended up being like a full 1 to 2 years younger than everyone that I was competing against. And I'm a small guy anyway. Like even I'm an adult now, I'm still 5'5". So I was definitely kind of physically disadvantaged playing sports and stuff growing up. But I never really thought about it too much at the time. I was just like, man, all these kids are bigger, faster, stronger, but I still wanted to compete with them and try my best. And I think if anything, that only helped, giving me something to strive for. And I think you're going to rise to the level of your competition. So no regrets with it at all.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like you said, your surroundings kind of drove you to be even more competitive. They could drive you either way, right? You could respond by being like, "Nah, I'm gonna compete against these individuals," or it's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna shy away from all of this," because physically, especially at that age, like you said, it like a year is a big difference physically, like in terms of physical development. Unless you're like, I don't know, there's guys with
Yeah.
beards and they're like 5 years old. You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember just getting my butt kicked in wrestling. I'm like, in high school wrestling, first year was probably I was still 14 years old or something, wrestling an 18-year-old in practice and like just getting my ass handed to me. I'm like, what am I doing? But I think it toughens you up a little bit too.
And so clearly you were quite academic too. So like a smart individual, a smart kid, and you kind of got being a year or so ahead, and you were going to go down the route of being a physicist, right? And
Yeah.
what drew you to that, and then what drew you away from that in the end?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of it was just growing up, knowing I was good at math and science and that kind of thing, and wanting to pursue something in academia, but I was never 100% sure what I wanted to do. I had seen my dad kind of go down that route, and he ended up being a really successful software engineer, but that also sounded a little bit boring. I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend my life behind a computer in that way. And so, in my kind of indecision, I thought, well, what's something that is applicable to everything so I can decide later and figure it out. And like, well, physics is like the foundation of all the other sciences kind of thing is what I was telling myself. So I'm like, I'm just going to pursue physics and then kind of figure it out, and I'll figure out what I want to do with my life after that. So I went down the physics route, got my undergrad in physics, was doing a little bit of research as well. And I think I kind of drew uh, drew poorly for my undergraduate research and just ended up in a very, very boring lab that I wasn't having fun with. It was like basically tearing paper apart in ultra slow motion with like a big hydraulic. There's like a hydraulic press, and then the same thing but in reverse where it tears things apart. And I was creating different kind of like crystal type lattice structures out of paper, and then like either compressing them or ripping them apart in ultra slow motion, just as some sort of like material science. Kind of structural research, and it was mind numbing. It was boring. I didn't care for it, and this was around the same time that I was on the Spartan Race Pro team, trying to juggle, 25 plus races a year with college and with research, and then with this kind of coaching business on the side that was growing, and it just got to be a lot. I couldn't even really do it all. So when it came time to pursue like a PhD, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep want to keep doing this. And so luckily my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she's like, why don't you just take a break, and like, you have this little bit of coaching income on the side. Let's just take some time off. Let's go spend 6 months in Hawaii, as just kind of like an in between sort of deal. So we ended up moving to Hawaii to spend 6 months, and kept growing my business. And I was like, it's pretty sweet life. I don't think I want to go back to school. I think I'm done with that. So kind of never looked back, and have been in the fitness side ever since.
Very cool. Yeah, the type of studies and research you were doing doesn't sound particularly
No.
appealing, especially
Uh,
if you're someone who, like you said, you've got so much on your plate. You want to be physically active, and for the amount of things that you do, being in control of your own schedule, your own like you can choose when you work, and then the recovery side too, making sure you can sleep. You don't have to stay late for whatever reason because your boss is kind of asking you to or what have
exactly.
you. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's I definitely I always think of this when I compete for bodybuilding shows. I'm like, I'm so glad one, I can make a lot of it tax deductible, which is it gets expensive when
Yeah.
you're doing all the travel, the tanning, the Airbnbs, and the
Yeah.
competition fees, and then even just being able to like really prioritize and be selfish, because when you're taking it to that competitive level, you have to be your best. So I feel for the people that have got full-time jobs trying to do this stuff. It's hard to juggle all of that. Is your coaching side, Alec, is that a combination of one-on-one and online, or is it all online? How does that look for you?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. Actually started online, which is kind of the more unusual way to go about it. I think most people start in person and then add online. So I got into the online space pretty early. I think I took my first online client in 2012 maybe. So it's been a while. And then I added in person. I actually started working as a personal trainer in more like 2016, give or take. So I added that a number of years later. The in-person stuff ended up growing quite quickly. I just kind of said yes to everyone. That's kind of, I think, a lot of young trainers' uh, pitfalls is they just take everything onto their plate that they can. They don't know how to say no. So I ended up working the split shift. I'd had morning clients, I'd have evening clients. I was just living at the gym kind of thing, and then trying to squeeze in some of the online stuff while I could. And in hindsight, I think that was kind of holding me back from being able to expand my online business more, just because I didn't have any additional time or energy or bandwidth. So it's easy to get kind of trapped in that space where you're spending so much time just kind of like in the business of training that you can't dedicate the time and energy you need like to actually growing or expanding or developing your business. Um, so it still slowly grew over time. But I was so busy, training clients at the gym 5, 6 days a week that it was definitely growing more slowly than I would have liked. And it wasn't until the pandemic actually, so 20 was it 2020, 2021, whenever the gyms kind of shut down here, at least I don't know what happened in the UK, but our gyms here closed for about 6 months. And everyone was going virtual at that time, and that was kind of a good catalyst for my virtual business to just kind of explode because I already had laid the groundwork. I already had a solid business going there in the first place. It was just like all of a sudden I had so much more free time, and I was able to just capitalize on all of the work I'd been putting in the years prior. So things took off really quickly at that point. Um, and 6 months later the gyms reopened. I did take some in-person clients again, but I decided I'm not going to let myself get that busy again. I'm just going to do the amount of in-person stuff that makes me happy and kind of satisfies that desire to still have boots in the ground, so to speak. So I train in person 1 day a week, sometimes two, but no more than that now, and it's all online besides that. I do one-on-one, I do consults, I have subscription-based programs, I have one-off programs. So kind of a lot of different options. I try to meet people where they're at in terms of price point and what they need.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I think it definitely used to be people would go one-on-one, as in they were a hands-on personal trainer, and then they'd transition maybe online or have a hybrid approach. And then obviously COVID happened. So I think so many personal trainers were forced to have they're like, well, some people were coaching people via Zoom or what have you, like WhatsApp, just video calling and taking them through a session. And others went like your traditional kind of weekly check-ins, bi-weekly
Yeah.
check-ins, however that kind of approach goes. But now, I mean, the joke is anyone who's done a bodybuilding show is like is a now an
Yeah.
online coach. There is
Yeah.
no barriers to entry. So it's kind of like if you've got a big social media following, and you probably have people that, and you're in good shape, which you probably will be because of that. You just draw people in, which is unfortunate. I would be interested because I think there's split opinions on this a little bit. Do you think your one-on-one hands-on stuff complemented your online stuff? Did it kind of do you think it's something that I would say there's two things there. One, do you think it helped? Two, do you think it's almost necessary to have done it? Or do you think you could go online and not having had any hands-on work?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't like to speak in absolutes, and I know a lot of people will say that like the one-on-one in-person stuff is absolutely necessary and that kind of stuff. I wouldn't take it that far. I think most people it's going to be beneficial. I think you need a lot of practical experience, just training period, and just spending time in the gym period. That could look like, you've been working out yourself and with friends, et cetera, for 10, 15, 20 years. I think you're going to have a lot of practical understanding at that point from kind of putting in the work on your own, that if you did take online clients and you're pretty smart and have good emotional intelligence and communication skills and all those things, I don't think you're going to be unable to do a good job. But I do think that there are some lessons that you're just going to kind of expedite the learning process, trying things out on people in person, 8 hours a day, every day, accumulating thousands of sessions across a number of years. It's just going to make that learning process so much faster. And it gives you just opportunity to kind of refine your skill set and try out ideas in person and get instantaneous feedback versus like, hey, I'm going to try out this cue. I send you a cue. I wait, I see how it went. And now a week has gone by and I get to see how did this cue work for your squats versus, in person, I try a cue and 5 seconds later, I'm like, oh, that's not working. I try another one. It's like, it's like a hyperbolic time chamber in terms of, coaching experience to be able to just try things on the spot every couple of seconds kind of thing, versus kind of that online format. So I don't want to say it's impossible to be a good online coach without in-person experience, because I don't think I was a bad one when I started. But I've definitely learned a lot that wouldn't have been possible through in-person either. So I know that's kind of a non-answer. It's helpful, but I just wouldn't be as absolute about it as maybe I've heard some others be.
I knew I would enjoy this conversation with you, Alec. You confirmed it by making a Dragon Ball reference, which I love. If you don't know, you probably don't. I have a tattoo on my arm. It's all a
Oh, hell
sleeve.
yeah.
It's all Dragon Ball Z. So I absolutely love that. And then also the not dealing in absolutes because you're not a Sith. And I also appreciate that kind of even keeled, nuanced kind of answer there versus just a like absolutely you must have one-on-one experience. I think maybe that comes from some old school trainers who feel like, oh, all these kind of kids who are making so much money through online coaching and they're terrible coaches. It's like, actually, as you just said, like you can gain experience without actually necessarily working one-on-one hands-on. It's similar
Yeah.
to some people say you have to have done a bodybuilding show to take someone to stage. It's like it's useful. I think it's definitely a bonus, and I'd pick the coach if they are two the same, but one's gone to stage and the other hasn't, because they kind of understand the feeling of doing that. But you don't have to. Like the stuff, the theory is there. But I think you'd probably also agree that those old school trainers have a point with those, because I know you're
Oh, yeah.
fairly present on social media and with some of, especially in the biomechanics sphere, with these like teenagers who are critiquing. I don't know, they'd probably comment on something you're doing and be like,
Oh, yeah.
Alec, this is so super dangerous, biomechanically unsound, and you're not doing anything beneficial here. It's terrible for you. You're going to get an Ebola or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like on both, I see, arguments on both sides, like with most things. I think that sometimes some of the, veteran trainers get an inflated idea of themselves just because they have, 10, 20 years experience. And it's the whole thing of like, do you have 20 years experience or, 1 year of experience repeated 20 times? Like that kind of cliche. There are a lot of, I think, in-person trainers that aren't actually good at what they do. They just think they are because they've been doing it a long time. And so I think sometimes they look down at, online coaches and that sort of thing, because they don't have the same experience. But those online coaches, even if they're in their first, 2, 3 years of doing it, even in a fully remote format, if they are hungry for knowledge and, constantly trying to learn and question everything that they do, I think that that is going to be a better coach than someone that's, been working at a Gold's Gym for 20 years, just doing the same things that they read in Muscle Magazine when they grew up. So I think it's, yes, the experience is important, but it's more about your overall mindset and your approach and your willingness to learn, and question yourself, more than anything.
In total agreement. It reminds me of when I was a one-on-one personal trainer. I can remember being in like the back room with the other personal trainers, and one of them had a men's fitness or men's health magazine, and they're going through and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna my it's my like 12 o'clock here. I'm gonna run this workout on her." It's
Oh
just like this
God.
random workout he's picked from this magazine. It's just like, okay, so yeah, I guess we're just exercising today and just burning energy. Like it's not
Yeah.
specific to the person. So I completely agree with you that if you're hungry to learn and to be better, like you don't have to have had that kind of hands-on experience. Just like if you've had 20 years of hands-on experience, but you're just fumbling through men's health magazines and just picking out workouts and not really caring about results from clients, you're just burning through them. That's not going to be make you successful. I did want to touch on your training, Alec, because you kind of didn't brush past it, but you said you're training for a marathon, and you mentioned, and I know you're looking for a sub 2 hour 45 minute time. We just had the London Marathon, and I think that perks up quite a few of my clients based around here who are like interested in doing marathons. So I'm very interested to talk about your training because I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want us to like sacrifice our muscle building, especially if you're some of them are looking to compete at some point.
Yeah.
And I did want to reference though, because I was completely oblivious to like what were good times, but a two sub 2:45 is like a very, very good time. So if people don't know times, I think I've got here from Google, the average is 4 hours and 32 minutes and 49 seconds for all runners. Under 2 hours and 30 minutes is like elite for males. So I know you've done very good times previously. I think you did a 2:50 even as a teenager and recently a
Yeah.
2:49.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have some ambitious running goals here. I'd love to hear what does the training look like? Because you also mentioned you still want to you still want to be hitting PRs. So I think
Yeah.
that's music to my clients' ears who are looking to do something similar.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love chatting the nuts and bolts of training. Thanks for the praise on the marathon time. It's funny because it's, a 2:40, like my 2:49 that I ran last year, the sub 2:45 I'm hoping to run, this year. it's like a top 1% time in terms of like the global kind of marathon population, but it's still like leagues away from like truly elite. Like the gap between top 0.1% and 1% is just absolutely massive. I think in most sports, but even especially in the endurance space, some of those elites just pull so far ahead. It's unreal. So it's one of those things where like in a big race, like the London Marathon or the Boston Marathon, like definitely running, kind of at the front of the pack where there's not a lot of other people, but the winners finished long before kind of thing. So that's kind of where my marathon fitness is, if that makes sense to people. Uh, but I mean, in terms of like just how my training has changed over the years as a hybrid athlete, kind of trying to do a little bit of everything, my emphasis on like strength versus physique versus endurance, and even other hobbies, like I trained for a mountain bike event a couple of years ago. It's definitely varied. And the last 2 years or so, I've been running more than I have in quite a long time. So I'd maybe slowed down a little bit. I had actually let my endurance fitness slide more than I had realized, because I think it was 2021 or something maybe. I went out and ran a marathon kind of unprepared, thinking I was still in sub 3 shape, and I ran like a 3:10. I was like, what has happened to me? Like, I can't believe that I let my running fitness slide so far compared to where it had been in the past. So that was kind of like a, okay, you got to get your shit together, Alec, kind of wake up call for me. So I started training a little bit more. I did a mountain marathon last year in Switzerland that was awesome. And then I ended up actually setting a PR in a flat marathon a couple weeks after that. And that was really motivating to me, because I'm like, man, like I haven't really been back at really serious run training for all that long. And I'm heavier than I've ever been. I'm stronger than I've ever been. So the fact that I was able to still PR after just kind of a year or two of like really getting back into it seriously, I felt really, really good about. So I just kind of kept at it, and training's been going really well. So I think I'll be able to continue to take off even some more time. So right now I'm running about 50 miles a week, give or take. I do a lot of incline running, cross training, heat training. I'm happy to talk more about each of those things, but they all kind of serve the same general purpose of, I'm able to get more kind of productive training time and training intensity without all of the just flat pounding on pavement all the time. So across the week, like this last month, I've averaged 10 hours a week of conditioning, but only about 50 miles, which I know only 50 miles, it may sound like a lot to some people, but I can run 50 miles across a week and, maybe 5 to 6 hours worth of training, but I'm still getting more like 10. So that extra aerobic time is really great. And then I've been lifting mostly still. I do kind of high frequency, lower volume. So I do a little bit of something every day. Usually doing like alternating lower upper 6 days a week, but they're pretty short, concise sessions. I'll just hit a couple of lifts for 1 or 2 working sets each, and that's it. But 6 lifts, and I've been maintaining that through this whole marathon prep as well. So any given day for me is going to be a double. I lift and do some sort of cardio every single day. Sometimes I stack them together, like get them both done in the morning. Sometimes I separate them, morning and afternoon. I think what a lot of people hyper focus on in the concurrent training space or hybrid training space is they get caught up in trying to optimize some of those like scheduling details of, should I do stacked sessions? Should I do AM, PM? Should I lift first or should I run first? And I think one of my most important messages for people is just getting the work done, period, is like 90+% of it. And I think a lot of people kind of nocebo themselves. And by that, I mean, they have this preconceived notion of what an optimal hybrid training program is, but inevitably it's hard. Like it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. We have life and stuff happen. So more often than not, you're going to be doing something in your program that you're like, oh shit, this isn't optimal. Like I had to, like today, I woke up, I was able to squeeze in a run this morning. I got this podcast. I'm going to the gym after this. So I'm lifting, maybe 2 hours after a 13-mile interval run, which is not how I would prefer to do things, but I'm not going to focus on like, oh, this isn't ideal and, nocebo myself into having a bad gym session. I just like look at every workout on its own and do the best I can. Trust I'm going to adapt from it, because I'm getting the work done, and that's the most important thing. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my main takeaway for people in terms of like when you look at my training, some of the things I've done, like yeah, I'm a higher level hybrid athlete. I have my ideas and recommendations for what I think an optimal hybrid training program looks like, but even I'm not doing that most of the time because I have a life and a job and family obligations and that kind of stuff, and so I think it's important for people to realize that sometimes a tough, effective hybrid training program isn't optimal. It doesn't feel great. You might show up at the gym with tired legs and you get it done anyway. And I think if you
Mhm.
just stay consistent with it, you're going to be able to get through a lot of that, a lot of that initial friction of like, oh man, my legs hurt today. I can't believe I have to squat. Really sucks the first time. Kind of sucks the 10th time. By the 50th time, you're like, this is just life now, kind of thing, and you'll be
Yeah.
amazed at how far you can go with that mindset.
Yeah, I think this is where your voice has helped in like this bodybuilding space. I'm a little bit in because I think again coming back to like that science based, evidence based, and people talking about things they've learned via textbooks or via PubMed, and so they do nocebo themselves. Similar to like ignorance can be bliss sometimes. I wish I'd known how important sleep was earlier in my
Yeah.
lifting career because I would have prioritized it and like even my education and everything because I just probably threw away lots of productive time by not prioritizing it. But at the same time, now people know how important it is. As soon as they get a bad night's sleep, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to have a terrible lift today. There's no point in me
Yeah.
training. Don't know. My Whoop is saying that I'm in the red, so I'm going to have a terrible session." Whereas I know you have this anti-fragile movement, which is just like a great philosophy, I think, in general in life. It's like, hey, the body, as long as you don't give it too much initially, it can adapt and then you can keep progressing it. And you shouldn't expect to feel amazing all the time because like overload is stressful, and to adapt and see a response, like you have to overload. So as long as you're performing within reason, you're not crap in the bed,
Yeah.
then like things are going pretty well. And it's also that kind of practical on paper versus sorry, optimal on paper versus in practice. What does that actually look like for someone and trying to juggle those demands? I guess for you at the moment, obviously with like 10 hours of running and then you're lifting, they're quite opposing in terms of one's high intensity, kind of heavy, short bursts, whereas the other one's kind of long endurance. Do you think that allows you that AM and PM and they're a bit more complementary than if you were to try and do like, if you went marathon training, say, and it was a different thing that you were doing? Does that change how you go about your programming?
Um, you know, I think sometimes when people think of the interference effect, they think of, like strength and endurance being, uh, oppositional or like seeing a lot of interference with like training volume or endurance training volume in strength and hypertrophy adaptations. But I think what people don't account for is that when it comes to longer distances, like training for a marathon or training for an ultra, the intensity piece is not quite as demanding as if I was training for, say, like the mile or the 800 meter or something like that. Um, so yeah, well, the volume is definitely a thing that has to be accounted for, and just like managing energy availability and nutrient status, like eating enough food, basically gets to be fairly challenging with the training volume. I can hit the gym, have super sore legs, and then go for just a 20-mile easy long run. Um, and like, not that the pace doesn't matter, but whether I'm running, a 7 versus a 7:30 per mile pace, like I'm still getting basically the same kind of low intensity aerobic zone 2 adaptation. So the potential interference with aerobic adaptations that people might expect from the gym, I think are often less relevant when it's just kind of easy volume. Whereas trying to train for like maximal speed at a shorter distance, I think would actually be a little bit tougher in some ways because the quality of those endurance sessions, like hitting really hard intervals and speed work and trying to have time for like more sprint training, for example, even with sore hamstrings from the gym, like to me that starts to get a little bit more challenging. And then similarly, with kind of gym adaptations, and we actually see this in some of the concurrent training studies when they look at like different kind of concurrent training protocols and their effects on strength and hypertrophy and VO2 max and so on and so forth. That as far as hypertrophy goes, it seems to be kind of a resilient adaptation of sorts, and that I think you can tolerate a little bit more background fatigue. It's kind of one of those things where it's like if you're getting the work done, you're probably still going to grow to some degree. Whereas some of the like max strength, speed, power, like your vertical jump, Olympic weightlifting performance. Those things are a little bit tougher to balance with uh, an endurance training program. So I think a like pure physique and pure endurance, so like training for bodybuilding and a marathon, is actually not as tough as people think in terms of the interference effect. It just becomes kind of an eating contest at some point of like, can you get in all the food? I think an underappreciated, kind of really challenging concurrent training goal would be something like Olympic weightlifting and a fast mile. I think that would actually be a really difficult thing to train for at a high level. I don't want to give people the wrong idea and be like, oh, I can't do speed work in Olympic weightlifting. I think at a lower level, it's going to be totally fine. But I think if you wanted to be an elite Olympic weightlifter and like run a, 4.5 minute mile, I think that'd be really, really challenging. So sometimes just in terms of like when that interference effect is actually relevant, I think sometimes people don't understand it super well. I think bodybuilding in a marathon, yeah, you're not going to be the best marathon in the world just because you're hauling around a big hunk of mass. Uh, but I think you can still train very productively at both things simultaneously, provided enough sleep and food. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's actually funny. It reminds me of when I was at university, I was doing a bit of running and I was doing some kind of bodybuilding as well. I hadn't picked anything that I wanted to specify at that point. This is over 10 years ago now. And I remember doing the running club and the guys were like, oh, you've got a bit of muscle on you, but don't worry, you'll lose that and you'll be a better runner. And I was just like, no, I
Yeah.
don't want to lose this. This is terrible. But it's really encouraging to know with you, like you're pounds heavier now, but you're still able to be as good a runner as like previous. So you've been able to like almost build up your engine to have adapted to this larger system, which is really, really cool. And I think also what you commented there in terms of them being quite different in terms of adaptation. So the interference effect is actually less concerning. That's seen within bodybuilding now, where people are like, oh, let's maybe not do hit and sprint intervals as our cardio base to burn energy to help with the calorie deficit to get you to stage. Let's just focus on like step counts or low intensity, steady state type cardio. So actually, I think the interference is much less. It's just having the time to get it done. Or like you said, the calories. You mentioned calories actually, Alec. I'm interested. Do you like count your calories or do you track body weight? What's your kind of system for making sure you're eating enough? And if you do track calories, I'm interested to know how many you specifically need actually.
Yeah, so I mean, before I even give my kind of approach, I think just some important context here is I think everyone is different in terms of kind of what their body, naturally wants to do. Like some people seem to be able to just gain weight really easily, but when it comes to cutting and stuff, they have to take a more, deliberate approach. For some people, it's the opposite, and they have a hard time keeping weight on, and so on and so forth. Whether that's physiological or psychological or whatever is neither here nor there. But for me personally, I find myself, if I don't think about food at all, if I just kind of live my life and listen to my hunger cues and that sort of thing, I will lose weight. I'll end up very lean and very skinny. So for me, just trying to get enough food and kind of force myself to eat sometimes is useful for me. So my general approach to that is monitoring body weight. I have a scale in the bathroom. I get on it most days. I don't get too worked up about it. I just kind of look for general trends. And if I notice like, okay, body weight is going up at a reasonable rate, then I just kind of hold the course. If I notice that my body weight is dipping below, kind of what I'm comfortable with for my goals, be like, okay, I gotta, make myself eat a little bit more and be more uncomfortably full, or go get some more, peanut butter or snacks or something like that, just to get the caloric density in there, kind of thing. And that's really about as far as I take it. If weight is going on quickly, or if I notice that like in the mirror I'm just not as lean as I want to be, then I'll kind of shift things in the other direction. But for me personally, I don't track very meticulously or anything like that. I'm loosely aware of my daily protein intake. Towards the end of the day, I might do a quick run through, but like, have I had enough protein today? I'm like, yeah, I think I'm okay. Or if I'm like, no, I didn't have a lot of protein at lunch or something, then I'll just mix up a quick protein shake at dinner or something like that, just so I make sure I'm hitting that target consistently. But that's really about as much as I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to guess as you were talking through that and caveating, I was like, you're going to be that person that can get away with eating a ton and it would be just that skinny individual. And that was the same as me when I was younger, when I wasn't paying attention to any of it. Like I was just skinny and it was a struggle to kind of put on weight, that kind of traditional ectomorph type. And yeah, I guess that's the thrifty to spendthrift difference in metabolisms where yeah, you have those people that are thrifty and they just put on weight or struggle to put on weight, struggle
Yeah.
to lose weight, whatever they do, which is unfortunate. But you just have to deal with what you've dealt with because I'm sure you would attest to it not always being great having to eat so much.
No, definitely not. And like every time I go on vacation, for example, just not, like being out and doing stuff all day and walking around more and not having like just food as available, I lose quite a bit of weight almost every time I travel for that reason, which is not always the end of the world. But sometimes it makes the workouts get a little bit tougher and that kind of thing too, to be underfueled. But on the point of diet, I will say a change I've made in the last couple of years that now I kind of am, frustrated with myself. I'm like, what have I been doing my whole life of training, and how much gains have I potentially missed out on? Is just taking a much more kind of liberal approach to fueling during workouts, even workouts that I don't need to fuel. And that's kind of the trap I got caught in years ago, is if I was going out for an hour run, I'm like, oh, it's only an hour. I don't need fuel for this workout. And you certainly don't. Like I can get through an hour workout without fuel. But what I found is that uh, just fueling anyway, and like having some sports drink or carbohydrate powder or cyclic dextrin or kind of whatever you want to use, just kind of fueling anytime I might just want to, or anytime that I can, just helps me keep my daily carbohydrate intake higher. It makes me feel like I feel like I'm recovering a little bit faster between sessions when I do that. And when I'm doing doubles, especially, like for example, I had 200 grams of carbs during my run this morning, talking to you for about an hour or two, and then lifting. Just having gotten in that 200 grams of carbs during the workout is going to make such a difference in how I feel at the gym later this afternoon. Whereas I could have survived the morning workout without it, but how would I have felt a couple hours later is makes a huge difference. So I think that shift from thinking about, do I acutely need fuel to get through this workout, versus like big picture, how is this going to impact my daily intake and how I feel later in the next day, and that kind of thing has been huge. I think for someone who's only training for one sport, you'll often see people downplay carbohydrate intake because they'll say like, by the time you go to train hard again, 2 or 3 days later, your glycogen stores will have replenished. It's not that big of a deal. You don't have to pay attention to that like post-workout window with glycogen replenishment. And I think that's true if you are only training hard, a couple of times per week, but on a difficult concurrent training plan where you might be training hard, 5 to 8 times a week when you account for interval sessions and leg days, and the fact that you're doing basically two programs on top of each other, the frequency of hard kind of glycogen demanding workouts is just that much higher. So I think taking a little bit more of an optimal approach to like peri-workout and post-workout nutrition does matter more for like a hybrid athlete than a single sport athlete. And just paying attention to carbs, just like getting more carbs in around training has been huge for me.
That makes so much sense. I think it's like you said, the more volume you're doing, and especially AM and PM workouts, the more serious you are about your goals, the bigger those like little pebbles become in importance. And yeah, nutrient timing in terms of hierarchy is like way further away than calories and kind of macronutrients and things like this, energy balance. But it definitely pays to kind of pay attention to those. I can only imagine with the amount you're doing how important that can be. I remember, I think for about 3 or 4 years, I was doing AM and PM sessions, all bodybuilding. So I just split
Yeah.
my kind of pull session into like in the morning, I do my back work, and in the evening, I do like biceps and delts. I stopped doing it because I just was finding I was like not enjoying that setup. Basically, it's like that discussion of optimal versus what's practical, living your life. And even there, I was making sure like, hey, I'm going to have my intra workout and I'm going to have like easy to digest carbohydrates after that first workout. And I mean, it's similar muscle groups, but it's not quite as important
Yeah.
as the stuff
Yeah.
you're doing. So I can only imagine that the positive impact that's had. But that kind of sings to some of just, again, evidence-based fitness, where sometimes things can be taken to an extreme where it's like, oh, nutrient timing was maybe overemphasized by like the bros back in the
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
and we had like books all about nutrient timing. It's this special thing, and then more evidence came out. It's like, it's probably not that big a deal. But then it's almost become too extreme the other way, where it's like it's only macros by the end of the day that matters. Nothing else matters. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, there's probably some benefits to putting some carbs around your workout.
You got to pay attention to the context, the training volume, the stress and recovery. Are you in a deficit or a surplus? Like if you're in a surplus and your training volume is reasonable, like I think nutrient timing falls really low on the priority list. But if you're in a deficit, I think it gets potentially a little bit more important. If training volume is high, it's a little bit more important. I think those sorts of nuances often get lost in the conversation.
100%. Something I did want to ask you, Alec. I know you're doing your strength training. Are there any lifts that you're doing that are specifically trying to aid your running? Is that something that you incorporate within your lifting?
Mm, it's an interesting question. I think that the idea of kind of strength training specifically for running, I think people take that idea too far, and they forget that what you do in the gym and running are so, they will always be so different. There's only so specific you can get in the first place. And if we start trying to get increasingly specific of, okay, don't do a bilateral squat, do a unilateral squat because it's more specific. And then it's like, well, it'd be more specific if we alternate legs like we do in running, and then let's do higher reps because it's more muscular endurance. And then it's like you slowly start to turn this just back into like all of a sudden you're then running up a hill with a weight vest on. It's like we're losing sight of what strength training is meant to be in the first place. It's meant to fill in gaps and provide the adaptations you're not getting from your primary sport. It's not meant to try to replace it or mimic it. Especially when you're doing a lot of the sport. If you were like, hey, I want to be a good runner without running, then sure, I might actually try to make your gym work look a little bit more like running. But if you're already, actually running for a couple hours a week, then I do want to keep it different. I want to make sure we're training the right tissues. I want to make sure we're getting the right kind of tissue level adaptations, creating some tendon stiffness in the right areas, those sorts of things. But in terms of, you know, coordination and balance and stability and some of those sorts of things that people talk about and use as a rationalization for like doing a single leg deadlift on a BOSU ball sort of thing. I think that gets way overemphasized. I think that the one thing that tends to get underemphasized, and I think there's a huge gap in a lot of the research on strength training for runners, is just the calves they're consistently underappreciated in terms of how important calf training is, how important it is to have a strong and stiff Achilles tendon. We just never really appreciate just the magnitude of the forces going through the foot and the lower leg when it comes to running. And it's kind of a shame because you'll see a study that's like, evaluating the effects of a strength training program for runners on performance, and you look at it and it's like they didn't even train their calves. Like how can you call it a strength training program for runners when you're not training the most important muscle for running? I think it's crazy how underappreciated that is. So if I could only give people one takeaway of like, okay, your strength training for running is train your damn lower legs, like train your calves, and it doesn't have to be crazy. Like just any standard calf raise is going to be fine. We could get into the whole like lengthened partials and isometrics and all that kind of stuff if you want, but like just do something for your calves, and it's it's going to make a big difference in the long run. And that's something I wish I had known when I started, because I didn't really train my calves much at all for my first, the first half or potentially even more of my training career. So having made that a much bigger focus over the last handful of years has been really great, and helped with some like chronic Achilles issues that I dealt with in the past and that kind of thing. Um, Beyond that, like if you're training your quads and your glutes and your hamstrings as any good kind of strength training program is, I think you are going to be fine. Um, I think having either some form of single leg work, it doesn't have to be your whole program, but something just to get into like some more muscles, like your glute med and piriformis and like some of those muscles in the side of your hip. You do want those to be strong, um, but even then, I think like the glute med gets overemphasized in terms of its importance for running. I don't want to say it's unimportant or they don't need a glute med or whatever, but I think even that muscle, when you actually look at the research on running and like muscle activity, and can people still run if their glute med is inhibited with like a nerve blocker and that kind of thing, it's like it matters, but probably not as much as it's hyped up to be. I think the calves are the big one that people just don't fully appreciate. So long story short, just train your legs, squat, hinge, do the things, and don't forget your calves. And I think ultimately you'll be fine. Don't take specificity so far that you start missing out on what strength training is really supposed to be in the first place.
That makes so much sense. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about the importance of calves for running, which makes sense because I don't really I don't program anyone running. It's not my specialty, but it's nice to know as a bodybuilder. And this might be why I think we maybe said it off air. Bodybuilders can quite often end up transitioning well into some running. They're good. They're training their calves, right? I am actually interested on your position on the kind of length and partials for calves. I can give you just my position on it at least. Calves are one of the muscle groups I've been doing length and partials on for basically since the research came out, because I was like, man, my calves they just weren't growing. They just like seemingly wanted, like, it's that joke, right? Team no calves,
Yeah,
if you know
yeah.
the joke. And I definitely was kind of not a proud member of that. But after doing length and partials, I was like, man, they feel like I just felt the calf now actually feel like something was going on. I'd get that stimulus locally to the calf. And over the last years, I actually even said it to my partner the other day. I was like, man, I actually feel kind of proud to wear shorts because I've got some calves now, whereas before I was a little bit self-conscious and embarrassed, which is that probably slight body dysmorphia that bodybuilders have. But I've
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
seen really significant growth from doing length and partials there. And lots of my clients have too. So I don't know where you stand with it. I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah. So, we could talk about things like, internal leverage and moment arms and that kind of thing. And like, length tension relationships and all that jazz. But I think to kind of simplify it in a way that is applicable to any muscle group and any exercise is I just like for exercises to be challenging through the majority of the range of motion, or at least like challenging through the lengthen to mid range. If it's really challenging in that like really squeezy part, I just don't think that like super squeezy stuff is generally like where we want to put most of our attention for most muscles. So if we just try to think about, is our exercise challenging in the moderate to lengthened position, you can just try exercises, try different machines, try different ranges of motion, different external resistance profiles, and just feel like, does this feel challenging through the majority of the rep? If I add a lot of weight, am I suddenly unable to do the lift at all? Or can I do, still the first half of the range of motion? You can ask yourself how you fail the rep. When you fail a rep, do you go from being able to do a full rep to suddenly just hit a wall and you can't continue? Or are you able to continue with like some kind of partially reps and that kind of thing? And I think just looking at exercises that way, you'll get a lot of information about like where in that range of motion and at what muscle lengths are you truly being challenged. For example, most exercises, if you just hit a wall, you're doing good full range of motion, clean reps, and then suddenly you just can't do another. That to me is an exercise that was probably limited by your strength in that lengthened position. On the other hand, if you're able to just like keep banging out partials and then pulses and then like hang out in that stretch position and just try to fight, and like you're able to kind of have this like just like hanging in there sort of effect, that's an exercise that was probably initially more limited by your strength in the shortened position, and then you still have some kind of reserves left in that lengthened position. So if you're doing an exercise where you're kind of hitting an instantaneous wall kind of thing, I think that's already a pretty decent kind of resistance profile where you don't have to do anything fancy. You've kind of given most of what you have in the positions that are most stimulating, so you can kind of move on from there. On the other hand, if you do an exercise where you're like, okay, I've gotten through a bunch of clean reps and now I can do a bunch of partials and now I'm just kind of bouncing up and down like off of my bouncing on my Achilles kind of thing. To me, that's an exercise that's like, okay, your performance was initially limited more at the top end. You still have a lot more to give in some of those more stimulating positions. When you find yourself with an exercise like that, which is often people's experience on calves of like you can keep going, your range of motion just gets worse and worse and worse. To me, those are good candidates for some of those. Uh, I don't want to say intensity techniques, advanced techniques. I don't know what the right phrase would be of either adding some lengthened partials or adding some sort of like integrated partials or partials at the end of a set, or doing heavier partials as their own set. I think all those are perfectly valid strategies, and I tend to find myself doing that on more than just calves. There's a few exercises that I find that works pretty well on, um, but it could vary depending on the individual, the specific resistance profile of the machine that you're working on, even your size, like muscle size can kind of change some of your internal leverages and moment arms. So your experience on an exercise might not be my experience on an exercise either. So that's why I always tell people just feel it out. Like, what does a failure rep feel like? And then let's just kind of go from there. For me personally, I end up doing lengthened partials on calf work. A lot of like hip abduction, like the hip abduction machine. I'm a big fan of like partials on that machine as well. And then sometimes on rows, it kind of depends on the particular setup. Sometimes I'll do some partials on rows as well. I find that those are just good examples of where there's often a significant mismatch between kind of external resistance profile and internal strength profile. So then that strength challenge or resistance challenge just kind of feels a little bit off. So I know that was a very long way of answering your question, but hopefully gets people thinking about how to maybe apply some of the concepts to other exercises as well. But the TLDR of that is, yeah, I'm a big fan of lengthened partials for calves.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, I mean, it's nice that that's the muscle that's probably been researched most looking at this, and I'm relatively convinced by that. And then my own personal experience and then client experience, like, hey, it seems like they're probably a good shout that something's actually going on there. And when I think about like the key to muscle growth is so much taking that muscle to failure. It's like, well, like you said, if you failed an exercise full ROM, but you could do partials and actually get some really effective kind of stimulus there, it's probably maybe it's the 3 or 4 reps in reserve at full ROM, but now you're like, you get 5, 6 lengthened partials in there. That's probably money reps as well, because they're going to be very stimulative repetitions. So I'm very similar to you, where I definitely incorporate it, but I love the breakdown of like practically in the gym how to think about it, because I think a lot of people again want that textbook. They want to understand the like biomechanics behind it. It's like you can just like Kasim says, fuck around and find out. People love to
Yeah.
hate on exercises. I'm sure you've definitely had this because you have some unique exercises that you like to do. People love to hate on them, and they're like viewing it through, I don't know, some anatomy textbook type of thing, whatever. They think their feelings about it, it looks not great to them or whatever, and they love to critique it without trying it. It's like if you actually just went in there and tried it. One that comes to mind with you, Alec, is the leg extension off the cable stack.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually think I've had a client send me that a while ago, and I was like, man, that looks gnarly. And I'm not quick to throw away exercises. Actually, one I posted recently, I don't know if you saw it. Dr. Mike was doing a sissy squat, but raised his
Oh yeah, I
shins,
did see that. Yeah.
yeah, off, and kind of, yeah, removed the feet being a factor. And I was like, I'm going to try that one out. And it was like, wow, I can see why Mike's doing it. People are so afraid to try things nowadays and actually experience the feel, and they want to like, don't know, have a textbook yes or no answer before just trying it.
I think a lot of that kind of stems from the optimal training crowd of looking at variables like stability and that kind of thing, and just kind of over indexing for some of that, where it's like, yeah, you want an exercise to be stable, but like that doesn't mean you have to be on a machine with a seat belt like for every single thing in your program. Especially like I think a lot of exercises that initially appear less stable, when you stick with them long enough and develop some really good skill with them, it becomes kind of a non-issue. I think if you're constantly rotating in novel exercises that all have a high degree of skill and stability, then maybe you're never going to go very far with any of them. But if there's a handful of exercises that you're like for example, for me, with the barbell lunge, I know a lot of people that I train, there's a big discrepancy between like their barbell lunge and their Smith machine lunge, for example, because they don't have the skill and the stability with the free barbell yet. So when you put them on the Smith machine, suddenly they can lift quite a bit more. Whereas for me, lunges have been a program staple for basically my whole life. So I'm not any stronger on the Smith machine compared to the free bars, because the skill is there, so the stability is not really a limiting factor. And so I think people don't properly account for that when having the stability discussion either. Is like, just because you can't judge um, the downside of stability or coordination just by looking at an exercise. You have to also take into account someone's experience and that kind of thing with the exercise as well. And the best way to compare it is like, okay, let's just compare this versus a more stable version of that and see, is there a difference? If adding additional external stability is not improving your performance drastically, then it probably doesn't matter all that much. But that's going to vary a ton by the individual. And so again, it's a case where the optimal crowd, they focus so much on variables and not enough on outcomes, like, can you actually improve your performance by adding stability or not? And you don't really know until you try.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I completely see that with the way that they end up looking at things. And yeah, sometimes I'm just like, it comes back to that comment actually at the start where you have people who have like done one show or they've been lifting themselves for a few years, and then they try and they've read some textbooks and they're like, oh, now I have all the answers. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect where they think they know everything. They haven't quite reached that point where they're like, oh man, there's so much I don't know. And they tried to put all those kind of feelings upon everyone. It's like, you haven't actually trained people in real life and got much practice with this. I actually had Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach, on the podcast a while ago, and we were discussing like dumbbell pressing and how some people are like saying you shouldn't dumbbell press because that's inherently unstable compared to a barbell. And he's like, man, like he's trained people, like they can take a dumbbell press to failure. Like, they have that skill set. So yeah, thinking people are throwing out like, call it S tier exercises like a dumbbell press because it's like, oh, it's unstable. I must only be in stable exercises. I think it comes back to that. If people kind of almost having that fragile mindset, that I must be optimal mindset. And really, I think that kind of isn't as important, and we just need to kind of be on a dartboard versus like reaching for that bullseye, which I think is your mentality to things most of the time.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for people to think about some of this concept with like intensity, for example. So I always make the argument that like you don't have to take a set to failure. You can leave a couple of reps in reserve. And in terms of, hypertrophy outcomes or strength outcomes, are we seeing huge differences between like 0 RIR and 2 or 3 RIR? Not really. So like I think it is really obvious when you point out that example that you don't have to push something to 10 out of 10 to get the best possible result. And I think that is very clear to people when talking about intensity. They're like, yeah, you don't have to do 10 out of 10 intensity, like obviously. And it's like, okay, well, why do I have to 10 out of 10 stability? Why do I have to 10 out of 10 range of motion? Like that just doesn't make sense to me. Like there's probably some threshold. I don't know if, how we want to like, weight the scale, but like I think taking a lot of these variables like stability or range of motion or whatever it is, taking it to a 7 or 8 out of 10 in terms of like fully maximizing some of those qualities, I think we're probably going to see near optimal outcomes or near optimal results just getting some of those variables to be good enough. I don't think there's any reason to think every part of our program needs to be 10 out of 10 because it's not really practical anyway.
No, I think of it, it's kind of actually, I made a post recently talking about stimulus to fatigue ratio, and having an understanding of that is helpful for exercise selection. So, like, hey, this is, if I'm just feeling it in my joints, connective tissue, and not in the target muscle, probably not a good idea. If I'm feeling deep tension and stretch and kind of burn, maybe pumpy sensation, stimulus within the target tissue, and not much of this other unwanted fatigue, is probably a good idea. And then people were asking me, you didn't really give many examples. I gave like a basically stupid example for most of the listeners. It was like doing a hack, it was a leg press versus like a bozo ball or something along the lines of that, like an Olympic lift or something like that for hypertrophy. They're like, oh, obviously that's like you're comparing apples to oranges. I was like, well, I'm not going to try and rank like a back squat versus Smith squat versus a hack squat leg. They're all freaking fantastic, and your stimulus fatigue ratio might change over time. And I think of it very much like top trumps. Like some have some things in their favor and they have other things in their favor, like a leg extension versus a sissy squat. One's a bit more stretchy, loaded stretch. The other one is more stable, more micro-loadable. So it's like you don't have to just pick one exercise.
Yeah. People drive me nuts with the stimulus to fatigue ratio stuff because they get so caught up just optimizing for like one very specific fatigue mechanism in terms of basically just like and more reps is going to cause more like local cellular or metabolic stress. And they focus on that fatigue mechanism, but then they forget about like some more kind of other ways that an exercise can make you tired from a more like global perspective. For example, like the if we look at the leg extension, if I try to just do like a set of 5 bilateral leg extension, I'm like gripping so hard, trying to pull myself down super hard. Like it turns into a full body workout just to try to not catapult off of the seat, for a set of 5. And of course, I could use a seat belt, but like they often don't get super snug. And like I'm still just kind of fighting for my life to stay on the seat for a set of 5 bilateral leg extensions. Whereas if I go for like a set of 12 to 15 for a single leg extension, there's so much less weight trying to throw me out of the seat that like the rest of me can actually relax and I can actually focus on my quad. So it's like, yeah, from a cellular like metabolic perspective, I'm getting some more calcium ions in my quad. Like, oh no, but like the whole like everything else about it is so much easier. So like, how are we accounting for that type of fatigue as well? And that just varies exercise to exercise. Because like on the leg extension, I feel like going single leg, maybe a little bit lighter weight, I'm able to really focus on my quad. Whereas I'm personally not a big fan of single leg on most leg presses because I feel like I'm getting like kind of twisted a little bit. I'm like trying to keep my hips a little bit more square, and I'd rather just go bilateral for a leg press. I feel like it's less tiring and less time consuming. So I think some of those things just vary so much exercise to exercise. Having this like overly narrow, you know, high reps or cause systemic fatigue because of calcium ions. I'm like, yeah, there's so many things you're not thinking about though. It's nuts.
Yeah, that's that's definitely something I've discussed and I've seen, and it so winds me up because it just fails immediately on this like real world test. I just like in the real world, bodybuilders being the biggest humans on earth with the most like fat free mass index, whatever. Sumo wrestlers, I guess, are meant to kind of maybe trump them, but they've got a lot of fat tissue too. But looking at bodybuilders, like the people trying to grow as much muscle as possible, do they do high reps? Hell yeah, they do high reps, and they're espoused by them as an important variable to do. And it's like it comes back to what you mentioned previously, I think, where people are so focused on mechanisms and not on outcomes. It's like outcomes is what we care about.
Yeah.
So why are we over indexing on kind of mechanisms there? And what you talked about there, again, it comes back to that just practical experience versus just textbook knowledge and parroting almost individuals in the space who I don't know. You see it even in the nutrition space. It's like Gary Taubes and hating against sugar and insulin and all
Oh
of this. You're like,
yeah.
man, you're a doctor. You've got a PhD. How are you? Like, why? I don't understand how people go down that route. It's similar in our space where I'm like, I'm sure some of these people are just doing it for social media clicks. They just know it's gonna trigger people or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I never really know like the difference between like people's ignorance or like kind of willful misdirection and that kind of thing. I don't know. Um but yeah, I would say like as far as systemic fatigue goes to sum up, like yeah, all else being equal, I'm probably not going to do many more reps than I have to. But there's just so many situations where like all else is not equal. It's kind of a big assumption that people are making with that discussion.
Yeah. I'm thinking actually, even I mentioned that kind of cuffed cable leg extension. Imagine trying doing that for 5 reps. I don't even know like
Nah.
single like you're not
Yeah.
going to be able to set that up. But yeah, equally, it's getting you into one like a crazy stretch for the rec fem, and like it could be a very productive exercise for
Yeah.
someone. So
I mean,
yeah,
I not to keep the same topic going too long, but like I just wanted to try it because I saw it and I'm like, I'm not convinced. I saw like cable cuff lateral raises, but where the cuff was taken like all the way up onto the humerus, like above the elbow. And I'm like, okay, I see the thought process of like, you're not having to put tension across the elbow and whatever. And you could make a case for why that might be optimal. But I'm thinking like, okay, we've now shortened the lever arm so much that we're probably going to have to double or triple the weight, which now means we have that much weight, like jamming the shoulder into the socket and pulling your entire body over to the side. Then you're going to have to offset as well. So like, we really like optimized it by reducing unnecessary force at one joint, but then now we're just adding more unnecessary forces at other joints that didn't make it into your initial analysis. Um, and I gave it a shot. And like the amount of weight that it takes when you have the cuff all the way up on your bicep for like a lateral raise, I'm like, I had like, 90 pounds pulling me into the cable stack. I'm like fighting with my other arm. Like, how, I just don't know how we can just say, like, yeah, this is optimal and like analyze the elbow joint. I'm not saying it's a bad exercise. Like if you've done it or someone has done it and they like it, then sure. But I think a lot of these kind of biomechanics things are just so short-sighted in the way that they'll just look at force at one joint or just one force at one joint, and they're just missing so much of what's going on globally.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. I'm not one that likes to throw out exercises. Like, I see them as tools in the toolbox, and if there's lots of people doing them for good reason. I know, like, the iliac pull down, the single arm, like, lower lat pull down. For a time, there was a lot of people like hating against that. I was like, man, that's sticking around for a reason. There's a lot of people
Yeah,
doing
it's a
it.
good one.
I think it's probably one to do, and it's now in my program almost permanently, because I'm like, hey, that lat needs to grow for me to be a better bodybuilder. I think that's probably the thing to do it. And I tried cuffed, just lateral raises in general, because again, people were doing it. And I was like, oh, maybe it makes sense to remove the grip factor, what have you. And I started getting forearm pain, wrist pain, elbow pain. I was like, as soon as I went back to using a D handle, it just removed that completely, and it felt so much better in that muscle. I was like, well, like, I've self-diagnosed there, and
Yeah.
like sometimes that experience is all you need to do. And I know you, like, obviously we've spoken about this point quite a lot, but I think it's really valuable for people to hear it from someone like with your level of experience and knowledge that, hey, also training as many clients as you do, it is important not to have that throw out mentality, but also not that black and white mentality either.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I think sometimes we take things too far. Of like a big experienced bodybuilder, someone who's really strong, will kind of shit on an exercise that they see someone doing because it didn't work for them. And um, my kind of response to that would be like a lot of the variables that we're talking about when it comes to optimizing an exercise. A lot of them revolve around like your ability to manage your center of mass and stabilize your body and stuff while you're doing the exercise, and that varies a lot depending on your actual strength level. And there's exercises that I have some of my one-on-one clients do in person that I would never perform myself because they would be impossible for me because I'm so much stronger than them. Whereas like someone who it's their first time in the gym and they're super weak, they can probably just half kneel and do an angled pull down because they have 200 plus pounds of body mass anchoring a 40-pound pull down. It's just not a problem. Whereas I can't do that. I need a more optimal setup. And I think some of that often gets lost in the discussion. And it applies on kind of both sides of the argument, where sometimes an exercise doesn't need to be optimal, theoretically optimal to work really well for a weaker person. But also, I think a lot of the um, like things that people are coming up with online and like some of the TikTokers are posting and that kind of thing, it's like you're just not strong enough for that to matter yet,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and so that sometimes is a little bit ironic where it's like, I'll see people doing some of these like, interesting like pull downs with like supported on the bench and that kind of thing. And it's like, you're not even using enough weight on that you need that degree of anchoring. So I think people just need to think more big picture of like, how to optimize an exercise really does change tremendously based on the actual outputs we're talking about. We can't just make a blanket statement of this is optimal for X reason. It's like, oh, you're lifting 20% of your body weight on this exercise, you can do it this way, compared to, oh, you're lifting your entire body weight on a single arm pull down, you're going to need to account for this and that in your setup. And that always gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah. So well said. Again, it's I definitely think there's something to, like, success leaves clues. Look at the biggest, the strongest, the people you're trying to be like, and kind of learn from them. But you're not them, so you probably don't want to train like them. You need to scale it to your level of advancement and kind of where you're at, and that's individualization. And you talking through that is kind of obviously clear that you're a coach and work with lots of people, because you kind of see that every single day. So this has been a great chat, Alec. I only have one more thing to throw at you, and feel free to kind of disregard this, because I know it's like a complete spanner in that sense. But I would be interested for you, over the last couple of years, last 5 years, however long, is there anything that sticks out in your mind that is something you've changed your mind about? It could be anything, by the way. It doesn't have to be training, nutrition. It could be finances, anything.
Oh man. You know, I'm asked this question often enough. I should really think of a better answer because it always catches me off guard. And I'm like, oh shoot.
It's one of those
Um,
questions. I have it down here, and I was like, oh, this is a nasty question for people. So there's the pressure to think of something significant, but it could just be something small. I think there's always some benefits,
um,
like even with small day-to-day stuff.
so you know, everyone at some point in their career is going to have these big kind of like aha moments where they just completely change their mind on something or make a 180-degree turn. But I think the longer you're in it, if someone's been in the industry for like 10 plus, 20 plus years, and they have a moment where they completely reverse course and just make a actual 180-degree turn on something, to me that's almost a red flag. That's like maybe you just don't have quite the grasp on some of the stuff that you thought you did, because by the time you have quite a bit of experience, I think we're talking subtle shifts and understanding nuance, and some of that kind of stuff. Not like, oh my god, I was completely unaware that this muscle existed, or something just outlandish like that. Um, so yeah, I think at this point, I would hope we're talking about like smaller shifts and changes in approach versus like entirely categorical reversal of opinion. Um, but I guess something that I have changed a little bit or shifted on is just the magnitude of effect and the importance of the repeated bout effect in general, in terms of if you stick with something for a long time, um, your response to it is going to be drastically different than what we're going to see in 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And a lot of these short-term training studies that look at, calcium ion related fatigue, for example, because the fatigue is kind of the hot button issue right now. And it's like, okay, if we take someone who does not have a lot of experience doing sets of 20, and all of a sudden we give them sets of 20, anyone who has started a 20 rep back squat program knows it fucking sucks at first, but you get a lot better at it. And I wonder, and I know for a fact that most of these fatigue studies are not using people that have significant experience with high rep training specifically. Also, a lot of the like calcium ion fatigue stuff is um, like modulated by aerobic fitness status. That affects our ability to maintain some of that kind of stuff and maintain local cellular energy availability. And how many of these calcium ion fatigue studies are accounting for aerobic fitness status and looking at people who also do a couple hours per week of cardio, and maybe they can handle a set of 10 instead of a set of 6 before some of these things start to become limiting factors. And so to kind of answer your question in terms of something I've kind of shifted my perspective on, is just how significant some of that kind of stuff can be, and looking at people that really on paper aren't doing things very well, but they've been consistent and they've been sticking to their program and applying basic, progressive overload principles for a year. Um, I would rather see someone do a bad program consistently, apply progressive overload for a full year, than like try this optimal program for 6 weeks and then that optimal program for 6 weeks and just be bouncing around. So, I've always known that consistency is important, but I think the longer I do it and the more I look at some of the stuff in detail, the more it just continues to shine through. Is like that really is the biggest, most important thing, is just stick with what you're doing and get better at it, versus bouncing around trying to find what's perfect.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I really like that discussion of, like, with a lot of the research, it's short term, and if they're coming to it completely fresh and new, it's like you said, they're not adapted to it in any way, shape, or form. Of course, we're going to see this like huge magnitude of effect, which in practice might not be something we need to be concerned about. Like, what's the long term kind of nature of this? And that is just one of the limitations of science, that most good scientists and evidence-based practitioners communicate well, and some unfortunately don't seem to. So I think that's a great lesson over the last years. And I agree with you too. If suddenly you have a paradigm shift in your practice, it's like, whoa, what have you been doing the past decade? You haven't been
Yeah.
learning very well. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a scary thing if someone suddenly has that, and it's like little nudging, just like a new research paper comes out. It shouldn't completely change how you
Yeah.
approach your training
Yeah.
or nutrition. It's like, hey, it just confirms a direction you're moving in or moves you back another direction. So, Alec, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure I'll bring you back on for some deeper dives into other perspectives and training and nutrition discussions. But it's great to get a bit about your background, talk a bit about hybrid training and just exercises and training in general. It was a good chit chat. If people want to keep up to date with you, they want to see some of your gnarly training and see whether or not you make this marathon time that you have set for yourself, where should they head?
Yeah, man, thanks for the chat. That was a lot of fun. If you want to find me, I'm most active on Instagram at Alec Blenis. I also got to plug the kind of YouTube project I'm working on right now. I just started the kind of training channel where I meet up with different coaches and athletes and just go through a workout and have a chat with them, kind of a podcast on the fly during a workout. Got about a dozen episodes out so far. So check me out on YouTube as well for some of that. And yeah, hope to see you in one of those places.
Fantastic. I'll make sure those are linked below. I just saw your training session with Jordan Sayat, who I've been following for ages. And
Yeah.
actually, I want to get him on the podcast eventually. If I know he's a busy guy, so yeah, he's a great person in the space too. So fantastic. I'll make sure those are linked. And guys, we'll catch you next time. Thank you, Alec.
Thanks, man.